So first of all, I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to both elders past and present. Just a quick intro for those from the FSU that are on the line at the moment. So myself, Jason Hall, I'm the local executive secretary for SANT, and I've got the privilege of kind of being in charge of the CBA campaign going forward. And we have Heidi, who's the campaign coordinator, and then we have two organisers in Chris, and behind that FSU sign is James, who's kind of helping us with the admin part of it as well today, wearing a couple of hats. First of all, before I throw to Heidi, I just want to say, let's just kind of not forget that CBA are not rolling out these new contracts because they want to, that they're basically being forced to by the undertakings that they are expecting will come out of the investigation by the Fair Work Ombudsman, that they have been rolling out these contracts incorrectly to people for a number of years. And Heidi will kind of go through the technicality of that. But we need to continue pushing CBA on these issues, and we'll talk about some opportunities and some things that we might be looking at as we go through the session later, including putting pressure on them to come back to the table and bargain. So I'll throw to Heidi first, and she'll go through some of the specifics around the emails and offers that you'll be expecting over the next period of time. And then we'll come back for questions and then a bit of a summary around some of the things that we'll be doing over the next period of time. Thanks, Heidi.
So first of all, I just wanted to talk briefly about why this is happening for those that don't know. So a few years ago, while undertaking the employee entitlements review, the CBA and the Fair Work Ombudsman also uncovered issues with the way that CBA had been offering its contracts to staff. Now, I do wonder if only there was a body that had been talking to the CBA for about a decade on the way they roll out their contracts and how inappropriate it's been. But thankfully, the Fair Work Ombudsman agrees with our position in that they should never have been offering contracts to brand new staff. So at the point that they are trying to employ someone, it should only be offered to staff that are employed. And that might be semantics, but it's still unlawful. Contracts should have been renegotiated every time a new enterprise agreement was negotiated, because contracts actually come or are born out of the enterprise agreement. And also when they've been offering their contracts, they'd never properly outlined the offer in comparison to the enterprise agreement. So people couldn't genuinely compare what they were receiving and whether it was a better offer. There was an assumption that it was, but they couldn't make that genuine comparison. So just a really brief timeline of events of what's about to come up. And I'll say the reason we're giving a very brief timeline on this is because Jason and I, in an attempt to decipher some of the communication and the language of the CBA about how this is going to operate, had our eyes crossed and just literally almost couldn't work it out. We're like, are they communicating then? Are they sending a letter then? So this is what we've been able to sort of, I guess, definitively deduce is that so it's going to happen in 3 phases, so 3 separate sets of staff. Those people that are in phase 1, they'll pretty much, you'll know if you're in that phase now. Communication will have already occurred with you. And what we know is that the offers will actually be coming out on the 8th of August or potentially the 9th of August. And I'll say that we haven't cited this communication as yet, so I do put that caveat on it, but it's our understanding that they'll need to be, you'll either need to accept your contract or moving to the enterprise agreement by around the 22nd of August. Phase 2, so the same thing will happen again. There'll be a level of communication that comes out to those staff in phase 2. And so that's going to be most of the people that haven't heard about being part of phase 1, if that makes sense. The communication will happen in October, and those offers and the letters of offer and the offers will need to be finalised by the 31st of December. We do know in early 2023, we don't have a date as yet, will be what's called phase 3, and that's going to be the remainder of the legacy contracts, like the old AWAs, etc., to go through that process. So we're not going to delve too deep into the timelines, but it's basically happening in 3 phases. And if you're in phase 1, you will have already been communicated with. So what's going to happen now? You're going to receive a letter outlining your annualized salary package, but you will also receive a comparison of what an unpackaged enterprise agreement employee offer would look like. We think it's important to sort of talk about what the enterprise agreement offer will consider, like how will they take someone who's been on a contract and decide what to offer them as an employee, as an enterprise agreement employee. So historically, when the bank has moved from a contract to the enterprise agreement, they've always offered the bare minimum of that particular grade. And it's morally wrong. It doesn't take into account things like your tenure, previous wage increases, and a whole lot of other things that needs to consider when they're making that offer. So what's currently in the enterprise agreement, it's very vague, very broad. So what they tell us within the enterprise agreement that they consider when moving someone to the enterprise agreement is that they look at people who have similar roles and tenure in a similar role to you. They also state that the group will also take into account any factors we consider reasonable in determining your new salary. Now, to me, that's as clear as mud. There is no clarity there on what they are considering when they make you an offer to move over to the enterprise agreement. The FSU has been toing and froing with the bank around this for quite some time, trying to delve and get further information about what it is they're actually considering. And finally, they have come back to us with an outline of how they consider what they're going to offer staff, or how they assess that. So if you look at and this will be in your communications now, but if you look at the CBA response part A, what they do at the top tier, at the first level, if they have this information available to them, is they match the employee's job profile, position, grade, and position tenure to internal roles and imply internal median base pay using a minimum sample size of 10 employees required to reference internal median information. Now, if that's not applicable, i.e. if they can't meet all of those requirements, it then falls down and they drop off a requirement each time until, if all they can do is apply a discount of 13% of the annualized salary package to determine the unpackaged offer. So that's currently what they're using. And I guess the frustrating thing for us is, why couldn't we have this information in the enterprise agreement? Why haven't they been forthcoming about this? And to speak to Jason's earlier point, the reason that we want things within an enterprise agreement, the reason we want this well thought out, well-rounded out clause as opposed to the single line that you saw in the previous slide, is because if it's in an enterprise agreement, it's legally enforceable. This currently, whilst they've said this is what we take into consideration, they could change their mind tomorrow. They could just scrap all of that and decide to apply another set of CBA logic, or CBA word salad, which has become our words of the day. So we are hoping to get back to the table with CBA later on this year. You'll all remember that we tried to get words like this within the last round of enterprise bargaining, and we were unsuccessful. We then tried to run a no vote on the enterprise agreement for many reasons, but this being one of them. And once again, we were unsuccessful in running that no vote. So, but we will be pushing in the next round of enterprise bargaining to have wording like this within the agreement, so people have much more clarity around what it is that they're signing up to and how it's being assessed. We've also, just as an aside, we've today written to the CBA and asked them if they'll be providing staff with information around, well, which one of these A, B, C or D did you apply when making my enterprise agreement offer? So yes, there's a lot of information in that to absorb, but we think it's important that you kind of understand how we've got here and how we can provide this information to you now. So what you need to do now is, once you receive your offer, it's about considering your own personal circumstances. It's not for anyone else to say or to assess whether the salary on offer or the benefits that you either gain by being on the enterprise agreement or lose by being on an ASP work for you. That's only for you to assess. Now, if you want to negotiate your ASP or annualized salary package, you're well within your rights to do that. That's what a contract is. It's an agreement, and generally a negotiated agreement between you and your employer. So what I've said here is to simply ask for a meeting with your manager to attempt to negotiate or change anything within your ASP. I do say that a little tongue in cheek, because I think we all know what the prospects are of CBA actually changing anything within the ASP, but it's certainly, you're well within your rights to do that. And so from there, once you've made that assessment for yourself, you either accept the annualized salary package or the unpackaged enterprise agreement offer. So there are a few things to consider when you're doing that. And I know that people that have been on contracts will mostly be across these things, but we did want to touch on what's excluded from an ASP. So obviously the annual salary increases of an enterprise agreement are not available. So as previously stated, an enterprise agreement is legally enforceable. So if there's a pay rise within the enterprise agreement, it's guaranteed. They can't, there's no backsies essentially. But there is no guaranteed salary increase within an annualized salary package. There are things around your performance related pay, the meal allowance, the span of hours, breaks between days or shifts, overtime and time in lieu, and annual leave loading. There's also something else that we do want you to consider when making your decision, or just information for you to have moving forward, is that, and this is, once again, this is in your communications, but there's a reason why I'm highlighting this. If you choose to sign the ASP, you can always ask to be converted to the enterprise agreement by simply giving 28 days notice to the CBA. And the reason I say this is I cannot tell you how many times I've had CBA contract employees contact me and say, I've asked to go on the enterprise agreement and they won't let me, or they say it's too difficult and that I wouldn't want to do that. And it's just simply not the case. That all you have to do is put in writing to the bank in an email that you want to convert to the enterprise agreement, and that'll take effect 28 days later. I've also seen within the communications that CBA make it look like if you choose not to sign an ASP now, that they won't offer it to you in the future. And I've got to say, Mike, it's simply not the case. Like, the bank would love to have everyone on an individual ASP because they understand that if everybody is on the enterprise agreement, it makes, the power balance sits with the workers, that when we're negotiating across the table for the enterprise agreement and everybody's on the enterprise agreement as opposed to individual contracts, that there is a lot more power in a large group of people than the individual. So I've seen that exact language, that if you choose to not sign the ASP, it may not be available to you in the future. It always will be. So just they're things that we wanted you to be aware of when sort of making this decision. So that's the bulk of what I've got to say. I know it's a lot of words at you, and I apologize for that, but and discussing contracts isn't exactly, you know, the sexiest thing to do. So it's a lot of just word salad. But we felt it was really important to give you guys a really black and white overview of what it is that you're being asked to consider right now. So thank you.